Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we are with the last part of the tour of the cell. So let's get going on the cell wall. Cell wall, non-living jacket that surrounds some cells. It functions as the cell's exoskeleton to provide support and protection. So that exoskeleton thing is just its nickname. Now, where are we going to find the cell wall? Well, we're going to find it in plants, prokaryotes such as bacteria. Remember, prokaryotes do not have a nucleus. We're going to find them in fungi and some protists, but we are not going to find a cell wall in animal cells. We don't have that rigid structure within our cells. Plant cell walls. So let's go with this. All plant cells have a primary cell wall. Now the structure is going to vary between species and sometimes even between the cells in the same plant, but they pretty much all have the same basic design. And what that basic design consists of is that it has these microfibrils made of cellulose. Remember, cellulose is that structural polysaccharide found in plant cells that we cannot digest. And these microfibrils are embedded in a matrix of other polysaccharides and proteins. So what's this design similar to? Well, this design of strong fibers and a ground substance resembles the design of steel reinforced concrete. I don't know if you've ever seen where concrete's been bulldozed up. That's steel reinforced, but you see the concrete is the ground matrix, and then you'll see these steel beams within it that would resemble the microfibrils made of cellulose. So let's take a look at a picture really quick here. And in this picture, we are looking at various cells, and then it takes a little section right there so we can see what it looks like. In the cartoon version or the diagram version, we see the cytosol, which cytoplasm, the plasma membrane, which is our cell membrane, and then we're going to see the secondary wall, which we'll talk about in a moment, the primary wall, and then the middle lamella. And then we see again on the other side, which is the cell right next to it, its primary wall, and then its secondary walls in the cytosol. And again, we're going to see the same thing here. If you look at this one, we've got the primary wall, and then the secondary wall, and then we have the cytosol. And the middle lamella is what separates the cells. So let's take a look at the primary wall first. Now the primary wall is thin and flexible. And you might think, well, why would it be, it's a wall. Why is it thin and flexible? Well, remember that the cells are still growing and expanding. And these cellulose microfibrils being put at that perpendicular, okay, being placed perpendicular to each other is what's going to allow for that cell expansion to occur. So we see those microfibrils, and this is part of, I'm losing my guy, there he is, my primary cell wall. Note that it is right next to the plasma membrane or the cell membrane. On the opposing side of the primary cell wall, we have what we call the middle lamella. And the middle lamella is this thin layer that's rich in pectin. Now, pectin is a polysaccharide. You might have heard of pectin before because it's very sticky. So we find it in sticky candy. So it is a thin layer, rich in pectin, and it's found between primary walls of adjacent cells. And this helps to glue cells together. Okay, so again, going back here, looking at our picture again, highlight again the middle lamella, which contains that sticky pectin, that polysaccharide, remember sticky candy, which then is adjacent to the primary wall. And then there's the secondary wall, and then the cytosol. Now in that picture I just showed you, that the primary wall was right next to the cell membrane. Well, here's the deal. So as a plant grows and matures, it will do one of two things. When it's stopped growing, it will harden, release more substances to help harden that primary wall, or it's going to build a secondary wall. So let's take a look at the secondary wall here. This is only formed by some plant cells, added between the cell membrane and the primary cell wall in laminated layers. So I want you to think laminated layers here. And what this does is it provides a very strong, durable matrix that provides protection and support to that plant. If you're looking for an example, holy cow, what's a secondary wall? Wood. It consists mainly of secondary walls. Okay, so organisms that have that woody stem are going to form secondary walls. Okay, and again, this forms between the cell membrane and the primary cell wall and provides a lot of protection and support. So again, we're going to see it right here, boom, in between the cell membrane. Right here's my cell membrane, and we have the secondary wall, we have the primary wall, and then we have the middle lamella. The next thing I want to talk to you about, though, is the extracellular matrix, what we term as the ECM. Now, we've been talking about plant cells, and I want to go into a little bit about animal cells. We're going to talk about animal cells and even in plants, that cellular membrane, quite a bit here this week. And it's actually going to be our focus, is that cell membrane. Now, the ECM is the meshwork that surrounds the cells. It is made of glycoproteins, polysaccharides, and proteoglycans. Okay, so what's a glycoprotein? Well, a glycoprotein is a protein with a covalently bonded carbohydrate attached to a protein. Okay, get it? Glyco referring to the sugar, the carb, and then the protein. So we have that protein and that carbohydrate covalently bonded together. Polysaccharides, we know what those are. Proteoglycans. Proteoglycans, what a fun word to say. And I'm looking down at this one. This one is a small protein with many carbohydrate chains covalently attached as well. Main glycoprotein is collagen. You might have heard of collagen before. Especially ladies, you might have heard, or guys, you might have heard your mom looking for a product that boosts collagen production in our skin. In fact, 40% of protein in the human body is collagen. Now, collagen is embedded in a network of proteoglycans. So let's take a look at this. Here's my proteoglycan molecule, okay, right there, and this whole thing is a complex. So it kind of just reminds me of a tree. Here's my branch, but the whole thing, if you're that little branch that is coming off of the entire big branch. Here we see the collagen fibers. Okay, and down here we can see our plasma membrane. And we're going to talk about integrins here in a moment. So what about this ECM? ECM is a lot cooler than we thought. ECM is, some cells are attached to the ECM by their glycoproteins like fibronectin. Fibronectin binds to cell surface receptor proteins called integrins that are built into the plasma membrane. Then the integrins then bind to microfilaments in the cytoskeleton. Okay, so let's take a look at this. What does that mean? That means that if this is my cell right here, and here's the microfilaments in my cytoskeleton, we can see these integrins, these proteins that are embedded in the cell membrane. And then right here, we find our fibronectins, which are attaching that integrin to the ECM, that collagen fiber. Ooh, what the heck would we want that for? Well, this is what we want. Function. Helps glue cells together. Now, we've known this. But now we are finding evidence that shows that this is how it can help to regulate a cell's behavior by communicating with the cell through integrins. So the extracellular matrix, what is outside of the cell, can communicate through this system of the collagen being connected to the fibronectin, which is connected to the integrin, which then sends that signal down to the microfilaments. So this communication can help regulate that cell's behavior. It can influence the activity of genes in the nucleus. What? How does it do that? It says, hey, we need some of these proteins. Amp it up. Let's go. Okay? That communication piece is huge that we are learning. Okay, intracellular junctions, and I'm going to try to speed up here a little bit because I want to be done. And I'm sure you want me to be done too. Intracellular junctions. In plants, we have the plasmodesmata. So let's take a look at plasmodesmata. These are the channels between cells that are through adjacent cell walls. They allow communication between the cells. And the bad news, it also allows viruses to travel rapidly between cells. So these are what that was a little junction in between plant cells that allow communication and unfortunately some other things to pass that we don't want to pass. Intercellular junctions in animal cells, we're going to look at 3. Tight junctions, desmosomes, and gap junctions. So here is an overall picture. I love this picture because it shows all 3 at once. Here's our tight junction. Here is our desmosome. And here's our gap junction. So let's take a look at all 3 of these. Tight junctions. Very tight fusion of the membranes of adjacent cells. And so this seals off areas between the cells, and it prevents leakage of extracellular fluid in epithelial cells. And I read a really great example of this. Because they're bound together by these specific proteins and it seals off that area, these tight junctions in epithelial cells, which are like your skin cells, make us watertight by preventing leakage between cells in our sweat glands. That makes sense. Okay, so it helps make us watertight there. And you can see the tight junction right here. Here's the cell membrane of one and cell membrane of another. And boom, that's my tight junction right there. Prevents leakage. Nice word. Desmosomes. These are bundles of filaments which anchor junctions between cells. These do not close off the area between adjacent cells. And the coordination of movement between groups of cells occurs through a desmosome. So what do we see here? These keratin filaments are anchored in that thickened plasma membrane. Okay, and their job is to function like a rivet. Basically, they're going to fasten those cells together so that they're strong sheets. And then it's going to allow for communication, coordination, for example, of movement to occur. For example, where are we going to see desmosomes? Where do we want coordination of movement? Muscle cells. Yeah, muscle cells. So muscle cells are going to attach to each other through desmosomes. And when you're working out and you're like, oh, I got a muscle tear, guess what? That's what you're tearing. Desmosomes. You're tearing that connection in between those muscle cells, which allows for the growth of the muscle, and I could go on and on and on and on. Last one, gap junctions. These are the open channels between cells, very similar to plasmodesmata. Remember, the plasmodesmata are the spaces in between plant cells. This is what allows for communication between cells. And check out, here we go. Open channel, which is between my pink cell here and the blue cell, which is what allows communication between the cells. Okay, now chapter summary. Again, look, why is life cellular? And what are the factors that are going to affect cell size? Be able to identify cellular parts, their structure, and their functions. You got to know these things, okay? Lastly, there is a cell animation link. This guy is pretty intense. Obviously, it's from Harvard. Okay, so you're going to have to watch it several times to be able to understand what is going on. But it's a great visual representation. All right, see you tomorrow.